Whenever you hear the name Mazda, you might think of a certain lightweight, legendary two-seat roadster that's sold by the millions, or perhaps even the company's illustrious rotary products. But yet, within the pages of Mazda's lore, there's always been sort of a missing piece in their gigantic puzzle, and that's some form of a dedicated hybrid vehicle. Now, in modern times, we've seen efforts such as the MX-30 electric vehicle, which was only sold on the West Coast, all the way up to the company's current plug-in hybrids. But yet there's never really been something to find that sweet spot. Until now, that is, because thanks again to the Parkway family of dealerships here in Kingwood, Texas, we're here to take a look at the 2025 CX-50. And as you can guess by what I just said, this little guy is now a hybrid. Alrighty guys, so you are seeing it from my perspective. We are behind the wheel of the 2025 CX-50 Hybrid. Now this is not the first time I have driven any variant of Mazda's second smallest crossover, of course the smaller one being the CX-30. But the CX-50 in my book has always remained, just to use an old term, kind of the Goldilocks of Mazda crossovers. It's not too big, but not too small. But the last time I was driving one of these, I was in the turbo variation, which, as you can imagine, a whole heck of a lot more powerful and more driver focused. I use the term dynamic to describe a lot of Mazda's vehicles a good chunk of the time. Whereas the hybrid like this, it's a bit more relaxed, it's a bit more laid back. That said, as we go over some pretty rough road here, you do still feel more of the sport suspension going on underneath. But then again, the suspension had to be beefed up because what this car carries is kind of a case of if you can't beat them, join them kind of thing. Because instead of Mazda using, say, the same powertrain you might find in one of their plug-in hybrids, they decided to collaborate with one of their biggest competitors, Toyota. And what we've got here is a 2.5 liter Atkinson cycle 4-cylinder engine paired with a 1.59 kilowatt per hour nickel metal hydride battery cell and 3 electric motors. We've got 2 up front and 1 at the back, thus making this car all-wheel drive. It may be an all-wheel drive, but it's still all-wheel drive nonetheless. Now, all added together, this makes 219 total system horsepower, which if you're comparing apples to apples, that's not too far off of a CX-50 turbo running on regular gas. Now, obviously with the turbo, you run it on premium, it's going to get a whole heck of a lot more powerful. And obviously this is nowhere near as torquey as the turbo, with this only making 163 pound-feet versus the turbo at well over 300. But from where I'm sitting, the visibility is fantastic in here. It feels not so much like a cocoon. I don't feel cramped. I feel much more at ease. You know, the seats are incredibly comfortable. You can adjust them in about as many ways as you can imagine. But you know, driving-wise, the steering remains very compliant, although I will say you will feel a bit of the weight in this thing, and boy, does it ever weigh quite a bit. Normally, these things right around the 3,500 pound mark, a little over, a little under. This one weighs over 2 tons, and it may only be by a few pounds, but it still weighs over 2 tons, which is ridiculous for the size vehicle that it is. But if you're going to talk about weight, not only is, like I said, there a pretty significant amount of weight in the steering, thus making it a little bit more engaging to drive, but the weight is really what happens to your wallet. Because even though this thing weighs over 2 tons, even a base level CX-50 hybrid is still going to cost you over $33,000. But you want something like this Premium Plus trim level that we're driving right now with its heads-up display and literally every creature comfort you can want, This particular car rings in at over $42,000, which is no easy way to say it, especially for somebody who doesn't make a whole lot of money. Quite a sizable amount to be digging out of one's checking or savings account. But you know, in terms of using a Toyota powertrain, this thing is near bulletproof. I mean, the Skyactiv engines are great on their own, but the Toyota engine, you know for a fact this thing's got a long life ahead of it. And the only other thing that is worth mentioning that may not be for everybody, because let's face it, Mazda is more known for other Skyactiv products like the Skyactiv 6-speed automatic that's normally in their cars. This uses Toyota's eCVT, or an electronic continuously variable transmission. And while that may be great for efficiency, as this thing is capable of up to 39 miles per gallon in the city and a little under at 37 on the highway, it does mean that it's definitely not built for speed. But it is still responsive. You give it a little bit more throttle, and those electric motors, you can definitely feel they are doing something. It's not like a shove you back in the seat kind of feeling, but it is definitely quite noticeable when you want this thing to pick up the pace. But you know, if you're going to live with a CX-50, hybrid or not, honestly, you can't fault really any one of them. I mean, anybody who knows me, I'm over 6 feet tall, and I feel very well insulated in here. I have plenty of leg room despite, you know, being a slightly smaller front seat. But you know, you can accommodate taller people really anywhere in this car. Well, not really in the trunk because, well, you wouldn't want to put somebody back there to begin with. But nevertheless, you know, road noise, pretty greatly diminished. I don't feel like, you know, it's too intrusive into the cabin. And just, you don't really feel the weight of this thing like leaning over to one side as you take a corner. It's very, very stable, so it's a bit of a interesting one. Yes, it may have a collaborative powertrain underneath, but it still has that whiff, that essence of what Mazda has stood for years, giving somebody a car that's kind of out of left field. It's not really one of the more obvious, like, go-to choices, but in the end, it's such a pleasure to drive. And now, being in hybrid mode, you don't hear anything. You barely have to raise your voice to talk. It's just such a, it's a relaxing feeling. I used that word before, but it is. It's a very relaxing and comfortable feeling when you're behind the wheel. And just to peer out over the dashboard, you don't feel like you're sitting a mile high in the air, but you don't feel like you're sitting too low either. It's just that right sweet spot of a crossover. But you know, acceleration-wise, if you're looking for something faster in a straight line, the turbo or even the normal 2.5 liter models are much, much more, I want to say, to the point when it comes to being what Mazda is all about. But then again, you know, driving-wise is just part of the equation. You don't want a car that just drives good, but looks like a box of rocks going down the road. And that's where Mazda's ace in the hole comes in. Now, it doesn't take but one look at the CX-50 to realize you are staring down one of the most artistically designed mainstream vehicle brands anywhere. And it starts with just simple design elements like the 5-point grille with this sort of chainmail look here inside of it. But before you even get to things like the adaptive LED headlights with those almost angel eye looking daytime running lights, or even the LED turn signals that have this sort of fade in and out effect to them, there are a couple of things you need to know about the hybrid specifically. First off, this thing sits about 2 inches higher compared to either a standard CX-50 or the turbo model because of the hybrid components having to be fitted underneath. This also means that Mazda has had to extend this body cladding on the lower ends just a little bit further down to make it a little bit more proportionally pleasing. Now, whether this is a bad thing or a good thing, I would honestly say you can't really tell much of a difference. I mean, the normal car still has all of the same styling elements, but a lot of them all have the same crazy amounts of technology that you can get even at, you know, a little under $40,000 as this one sits. You have things like Mazda's radar cruise control with stop and go and speed limit assist. You have head-on collision mitigation with smart braking. You have lane following, lane keep assist. Really anything you need is all right here just on the face of it. Now, if you're somebody like me who can be a bit of a numbers nerd at times, you may find it surprising to know that although the CX-50 slots below the CX-5, this thing is longer than its supposedly better sibling. The CX-5 measures 180 inches long, there or thereabouts by about 1/10 of an inch or two. This thing measures almost 186 inches long. So that means although it may not win in terms of height compared to the CX-5, its length certainly makes up for it in the end. And also talking about making up for things, yes, you can see the body cladding is sneaking up a little bit more into this polymetal gray metallic that we have on this particular car here, but you'll also notice that compared to something like a CX-50 Turbo, the hybrid wears a slightly smaller wheel than its more powerful brethren. This one wears 19-inch silver and black painted aluminum alloy wheels, and I love the design on these. The sort of twisted split 5-spoke shape, the right proportions of the gloss black and silver painted accents. I just love how they look. And of course, naming it a bit of efficiency here, we've got 225/55 series Goodyear all-season tires all the way around. And although this car's near 40 mile per gallon rating might make your wallet feel a little bit more at ease in terms of fuel costs, when you're paying over 40 grand for any vehicle, you would expect to get your money's worth, right? So for this CX-50 hybrid, we have power folding exterior mirrors with their LED turn signals on the side. This Premium Plus trim gives us blind spot monitoring, rear cross traffic alert as standard. Same thing with the panoramic sunroof hidden in between the two bright silver roof rails. Now, what I like about this panoramic roof, and I've said this about quite a few cars, is that there's a lot more of the body structure around the actual roof itself. So it doesn't have as much of a tendency to shatter in a crash compared to ones that extend from roof rail to roof rail. But as to be expected as well, this car comes standard in any trim with Mazda's advanced keyless access. Now on the upper end ones like this, you not only have the standard Mazda key, which we've been seeing for years now with the usual array of buttons on the side, lock, unlock, power tailgate, and panic, not to mention the hidden key blade that comes out of the back of the key, which you have to pull the door handle back to access the keyhole for this, but it works like everything else. You want to lock it, you just touch the edge of the handle, and then of course to unlock it, you just get in like you would normally. Now, although the face of this thing definitely has all the presence in the world one could want, when it comes to the CX-50's rear end, this is the area where I would say it's a bit more about utility versus showmanship. You still have enough back here to keep you happy though, like the subtle rear spoiler across the top of the tailgate. You have the full LED lighting that includes the same fade effect turn signals that you'd find up at the front. You also have a third hybrid badge here on the tailgate, as if the two on the front fenders weren't enough to tell you that this is no ordinary CX-50. And to tie it all off, Mazda gave even this hybrid version its signature twin exhaust. But that isn't the most surprising part about the CX-50, especially when it comes to those who are looking for the most practicality for your money. Because you open the power tailgate on this, which the first surprise is that this particular example I'm showing you does not have the hands-free smart trunk access, but even more so when you open it up, that's where the biggest shock of it all lies. And sadly, that means we have to talk about the CX-50's practicality. Now I say sadly because unfortunately this thing is nowhere close to a class leader when it comes to being the most utilitarian of the compact crossovers. But from a visual standpoint, you might look at this thing and say, well, that's more than enough room for my daily grocery shopping trips, or perhaps even, a couple of travel bags could fit back here. It still is quite the practical vehicle despite losing 2.2 cubic feet of cargo volume compared to even a standard CX-50. At 29.2 cubic feet, well, the numbers on paper don't lie. It really is nothing close to a breadwinner back here. But fold down the 60/40 split fold rear seats using these little handles here on the inside of the tailgate, you're looking at a whopping 89.2 cubic feet of cargo volume. And don't think you can lift up this rear floor and expect a bit of extra storage either. Again, even though a lot of the hybrid powertrain hides under there, the rest of the space has been taken by a compact spare tire. So yes, I am thankful that Mazda has given us an alternative to just putting this thing on a tow truck should you get a flat. But unfortunately, a lot of you may be dismayed to know that on paper, she's definitely nothing close to being at the top. Now, although this car has a very sleek and svelte appearance on the outside, when you're in it, you finally understand not only the true potential of Mazda's craftsmanship, but you sense that they've accomplished this in such a simplistic, yet again, a very artistic fashion. Everything is built to a bit of a higher spec, especially for a mainstream brand. But you also notice they haven't really gone excessive in terms of the way they've designed everything. Like your Mazda Commander station down here, there's not really many buttons at all. Your climate controls, anything else in here is just so simply laid out, and it probably is the pièce de résistance as far as Mazda's design in general. Now again, considering we're in the top level trim here, you will notice there are some things that stick out a bit more, starting with not only this beautiful red interior color that we have, but also the premium leather seats are stitched together in such a way that again reminds you of something much more luxurious, much more high-end. The black leather stripe with the color match stitching going down the middle. The seats are heated. They are ventilated. The driver's side has a 2-person memory setting. You have a leather-rimmed steering wheel that is quite frankly one of the best looking wheels out of any mainstream brand. The thin spokes going every which way, the buttons are laid out with their bright silver trim, and everything is just so easy to find and control. From your cruise control and safety settings on the right to on the left, you have your gauge cluster adjustments for the thin film transistor display that takes up the center part of your part digital, part analog gauge cluster. But you'll also notice that this being the hybrid, there are no paddle shifters on the back, which honestly, that's not really a downside at all. It just adds to more of a comfort level for most drivers, not knowing you have the paddles to kind of rest your hands on in the back. But other than that, you really don't need much else to get as comfortable as you could possibly be behind the wheel. But should you find you need a little bit of extra entertainment to overcome the quietness that this hybrid can provide, well, Mazda has included a 10.25-inch high-definition infotainment display. Now, you can get standard stuff like your navigation and your Mazda Connect system, but you also get the other things that a lot of us expect nowadays. Wireless Android Auto, wireless CarPlay, you have Amazon Alexa built in. I mean, anything you really could want in a modern day $40,000+ crossover is all contained within the screen up top. And what it's hooked up to is also something that not only I've become quite fond of, but also seems to be quite the talking point when it comes to Mazda's products. And that is their partnership with Bose audio systems. Specifically in this one, we've got 12 speakers, and quite frankly, it doesn't feel like it needs a single another one. But remember I talked about that simplistic factor earlier? Just take, for example, yet again, the climate controls in here. It's a dual zone system, Ben. Even though the buttons may be a little bit on the smaller side than most might like, everything is just right where you need it to be. Not to mention you have the small little display for things like your airspeed, air recirculation, temperature, and so on. And speaking of the temperature, you also have automatic and air synchronization built into the temperature knobs. You have heated, ventilated seat controls, everything in one compact little space right there in the middle of the dashboard. And everything else is just as simple the further down you go, from your extra little storage in front of your 2 little cup holders, Mazda Intelligent Drive, the central Mazda command station with your scroll wheel and other applicable buttons, and even a hidden wireless charger that can be found underneath this split level glove box. So simple, yes, but upscale, definitely. And as if what's in the front of this car wasn't enough of a shock to a lot of you for being a hybrid and being what it is in general, then getting into the back seat may be the most pleasant surprise you'll ever have in a compact crossover. Sitting bolt upright in these rear seats, there are 2 things that you notice right off the bat. First of all, I'm over 6 feet, or at least right at 6 foot, depends on what the doctor says, of course, but I still have at least a little bit of room between my knees and the back of the seat. I also have at least enough room to move my head around, even though the rear headliner isn't as dented or indented as a lot of people might like, especially taller folks like myself. But you'll also notice that Let's say you're someone that suffers from a bit of motion sickness perhaps. The rear seats, because these sit on top of the hybrid battery pack underneath, it's more like a stadium style, so the front seats sit a little bit lower than how you would in the back. And the commanding view you have back here is almost a full 360 degrees. So that is definitely a benefit if perhaps you have kids who don't do so well on road trips or just don't like being in the back seat. It's much more accommodable, especially considering the size of the vehicle. Now, in terms of positives, you have two USB-Cs at the back of the center console, and you also have the ubiquitous armrest with twin cup holders, just in case you need a little something extra here in the back. Now, would I say it's the most accommodable back seat of all the compact crossovers? Not really, but it's definitely not the worst one you'll ever sit in either. And on that note, everybody, this now concludes our review and drive of the brand new 2025 Mazda CX-50 Hybrid. Now, before again we say another word about the car, I have to once more give my biggest thank you ever to the Parkway family of dealerships out here in Kingwood, Texas, specifically Parkway Mazda, alongside another big thank you to my friend Reed, who is one of the internet directors at Parkway, for combining all of their generous efforts to make this review possible. Without all of their help, I honestly would not be standing here talking about another one of their brand new cars. And if you guys are interested in not only the particular Mazda that you've seen here, but maybe any other brand new Mazda or Kia or any piece of their pre-owned inventory, take a visit down in the description box below where I've provided all of their applicable contact information. But as far as the car goes, honestly, I think this is quite the sweet spot where it still has that whiff of Mazda magic, but it isn't quite as high-strung or up there in terms of the performance levels like you might expect from other Mazda products. But all the same, it still has the same simple yet elegant profile. It still has all the creature comforts you could want. It makes you feel like something much more special than just another mainstream car buyer. But if you guys have enjoyed this review, or perhaps you learned something about the CX-50 Hybrid today, give this video a thumbs up, and also while you're at it, hit the subscribe button down below, because as many opportunities as I've had, this one certainly would not have happened without all of your support to go along with it. But in the end of it, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you all in the next one. Take care, everybody, and stay safe.